Eric, can you hear me? Can you guys all hear me? Yeah. Okay, great.
Your destination is on the right.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this Data Science Dojo meetup. I'm Blair. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Data Science Dojo, and I'm responsible for all marketing campaigns and initiatives. So I've been with the company for about 3 years, and I also, aside from doing marketing, I also teach the online experimentation and A/B testing module at our bootcamp. So you guys get a little sneak peek about our 5-day data science and data engineering bootcamp. So today we'll be covering online experimentation and A/B testing, and we'll be discussing the fundamentals, AA tests, multivariate testing, and common pitfalls. So just to give you an overview of the agenda, this overview will give you enough to understand the fundamentals of A/B testing, but just enough to basically do an A/B test, run an online experiment, conduct all of the steps in experimentation. And at a high level, we'll be looking at what are some interesting examples and case studies in A/B testing. So what's really great about this part, this is my favorite part of the talk, is it's going to be a little bit interactive. So we'll actually be looking at case studies in A/B testing, and we'll be looking at 2 different versions, version A and version B, and we'll be trying to decide intuitively if version A or if version B performed better. So I'd really encourage you to participate. It's a lot of fun, and it kind of goes to show, how much we rely on our intuition versus conducting actual experiments. We'll also be talking about some terminology and steps in experimentation, as well as the fundamentals of hypothesis testing. And this might be similar to some of the hypothesis testing that some of you are used to doing. We'll also be talking about metrics in A/B testing. So if you're in the business of data, your ability to define metrics will actually determine your contribution to your company. Because sometimes you don't know what to measure. And if you don't know what to measure, then you don't know what's going on. So figure out what's important to you. And it's going to be different for every company, your job title, your industry, and project you're working on, right? It could be click-through rate. Maybe that's what's important to you. Revenue per user, revenue per month. So again, decide what's important to you. And we'll also look into some further details around what companies like Facebook and Amazon are doing with their experiments. And then this talk is mainly a focus on an intuitive understanding versus any specific mathematical formulas. But you'll learn just enough statistics, just basic enough, null and alternate hypothesis. We'll be looking at type 1 and type 2 errors, and also confidence intervals. Okay, who has seen this before? Some of you? This is the mantra now, right? In God we trust, all others bring data. So what does that mean? Right? So let's say you come to me and you say, Blair, I've been working on this feature and it's going to work. It's going to generate a lot of revenue. Okay, prove it. show me the data, right? Because otherwise, I can't trust you. I have to see it. There has to be data to back it up, right? This is how businesses work, and you have to take a data-driven approach. There's an interesting anecdote. Greg Linden from Amazon. How many of you have heard of Greg Linden? So Greg, actually, he suggested that recommendations be shown in the checkout. But when he went to his boss or his supervisor, his boss said, no, we don't want to distract the user in the checkout, right? We don't want to distract them or prevent them from making a purchase. And perhaps at the time, conventional wisdom said, we don't want to distract the user. But Greg had already set up an experiment, and the results were such that when he conducted the A/B test and they saw the results, they implemented recommendations immediately, right? And now you can't imagine Amazon without the recommendations, right? Especially in the checkout. I mean, you don't leave Amazon without buying something, right? Sometimes you often buy more than what you had planned on buying. And this just goes to show kind of an interesting dilemma that a lot of companies face, which is they think they understand their customer. But oftentimes you would realize that customers would behave much differently than you would think, right? Subconsciously or otherwise. We often don't realize the choices that we're making once we enter a website, right? I may take one path. I might visit a certain set of pages, whereas Nathan might visit a different set of pages. We just don't know why. And that's why it's important to test. Okay, so what really is A/B testing? So at a high level, A/B testing looks something like this. You have two landing pages here, right? We have version A. Version A is our existing experience, our control. And then we have version B, which is our new experience. This has the change that we want to make. So this is our treatment, right? So maybe I change the content body to the right, or I change the navigation to the left, or maybe I change the color of a call to action. Whatever your goal is, call out your criteria for success ahead of time. You're gonna wanna split your sample into two. It doesn't have to be 50-50, but again, call out your criteria for success ahead of time. And this is especially important because let's say you're optimizing for newsletter signups, but the version B, the treatment, had a higher click-through rate. So would you think that version B was more successful? Maybe, depending on what you're optimizing for, right? So you have to call out your criteria for success ahead of time. Another example. So here we're looking at Google, and specifically the call to action. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we call buttons call to actions in marketing. So here we're looking at a call to action, and it looks like that takes you to your profile or user settings. And so now, version B, we're changing that call to action from green to red. That's it. Everything else stays the same, except for the call to action, right? Otherwise, the data can get a bit messy. So, just based on this one change, would changing the color of the icon give me a higher click-through rate? How many of you think so? Yeah? Right. Because that's what it is. It's a call to action. It is calling you to take an action.
What does action do?
To click through.
Okay. And that takes you, what does that do? Where does it lead you to?
So this in particular would take you to your Google profile or account settings. But maybe it's a newsletter and you want people to click through to your website, or maybe you want a conversion. So it'll take you to the registration page. Okay. And then what about lower bounce rate? How many of you are familiar with bounce rate? Okay, good. So a bounce is essentially when somebody visits your website and visits a page and leaves your website after visiting that page without taking a subsequent action. So let's say you visited 5 pages, and that last page, that 5th page, there are no actions. You don't download a form, you don't leave any contact information, you don't watch a video, you just leave. So that would count as a bounce. And Google doesn't really distinguish if you have different tabs open. So if you made a conversion on one page, it would actually count those different tabs as different sessions. What about higher, sorry?
Quick question.
Yeah.
So you have got multiple tabs open and a conversion happened, then would you consider other tabs if any other transaction happened part of it?
Right, so those would be bounces if you didn't take any other actions on those tabs. And then what about higher revenue per user? Hopefully, yeah, depending on where that button takes you, you would hope to have, you would hope to generate more revenue. Any questions so far?
So I have a question on this first slide, sir. When we randomly split the population for treatment and control, what's the right proportion? Because say we select just like 50 users for control and say we select 500 users for treatment, right? So eventually, since it's a large number of
Yeah.
user base,
It depends on the population. And I'll get into a bit of confidence intervals and sample size a little bit later. But yes, it's something that is important. So you want to make sure that you have a large enough sample size that your results are statistically significant. So, okay, so why do we do A/B testing? Users are complex and our intuition is often wrong. And when we look at those case studies in just a moment, I think some of you will figure out, okay, what I thought was going to be more effective was actually the opposite of how the customers behaved. Right, and why do we do it? To know what the customers want, subconsciously or otherwise, right? We may not understand the choices we make, we just make them. And then the problem we face, rolling out a feature to all the users at the same time is risky, right? So let's say as a business perspective, if something is broken or funky or messy or the quality is off or maybe there's too much noise, maybe there's a sampling problem and you didn't randomize correctly, and that results in a 1 to 2% impact. Well, 1 to 2%, that's not a lot. But when you're talking about companies like Microsoft or Amazon or Apple that are billions, worth trillions of dollars, you're talking about that 1 to 2% actually can result in millions of dollars in lost revenue. So that is why it's important to test. And it helps to fail fast and move on quickly. And another thing that's really important is the impact is expected to be positive, but the outcome is often humbling. And if there's anything that you take away from this talk today, it's that relying on intuition isn't always the best way to go. Okay. Can anybody figure out why I'm showing you this image?
Because he's got a great smile.
Because he's got a great smile. How many of you are aware that data science was used extensively in the Obama campaign? And do you think data science can be used in politics?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Actually, it was used in most campaigns.
Yeah, actually. So now it's my data science team is better than your data science team, and therefore I win the election. And now it's how well do you understand these interactions, right? Obama's team actually used data science quite extensively. And one thing I kind of want to ask is, what about the 2016 elections? You all remember that, right? What happened there? Why couldn't we predict that? Why couldn't we predict that outcome? How many of you thought it was going to swing a different way? Possibly, right? CNN got it wrong. Nate Silver, 538, got it wrong. All of these data scientists got the results wrong. So what happened there? Why couldn't we predict that?
Voters are complex.
Users are complex.
Yeah.
Voters are complex.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Lots of people while coming out on exit poll said opposite. Like they lied in the exit poll. And this elections swing the other way.
They just were those swing voters. So they said that they were going to vote one way and they ended up voting another way, right? Sure, maybe people didn't show up to vote, right? I think only 30% of people only showed up to vote. Do you think people lied? Yeah, probably.
Possible. Yeah.
Politics can be very polarizing, right? So maybe you're around your friends and your family and you say you're going to vote for someone because that's who they're voting for, right? I'm not sure, do any of you have family members you don't talk to because of politics? It happens, right? So yeah, I'm sure people lied.
CNN or some other newspapers said that when people came out to exit poll, they gave wrong data and they corrected it later, like 2-3 months later, they said that we lied on the exit poll.
So there you go. People lied. There's an interesting documentary on Netflix that I would encourage you to check out. It's called The Great Hack. Essentially, what that goes over is the 2016 elections and how Cambridge Analytica, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, used Facebook data. So what they did was they pulled Facebook data based off this one quiz. They were able to get data from these users of the quiz, people who took the quiz, and then through them, their friends, and then their friends' friends. So basically, they were able to build a profile of American voter data. And what they were able to do was segment a group called the persuadables, right? So these were the people that were the most vulnerable, right? These were the ones that were probably the easiest to persuade them to swing their vote, right? And what they did was they ended up bombarding them with millions of ads, millions of campaign ads. So let me ask you this. Is this ethical?
What are the question?
Sorry, can you ask that again?
No, sorry. What are the question again?
So is what they did ethical?
Maybe, maybe not. It's
Maybe not.
matter of your
Ethical or
perception.
not, but again, data science was also used in that purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? They use that intelligence to, inspire or to influence the outcome.
Right. And what I'm asking is that ethical? These ads that they were showing.
I mean, maybe, yeah, I mean, they're not pressurizing anyone. They are just presenting them with
Yeah.
some extra information that they can leverage.
And
This lines up with the regular election tactic of targeting specific demographic groups. And it's not unusual that way.
Not unusual.
Yeah.
It's not different than any Facebook advertisement, because when you do Google search something, then Facebook will, comes to you out with the old advertisement stuff. I think it's not different than that. It's at the end, it depends on the person.
But would you say that there's maybe a gray area there?
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
Like the market.
right. So, and one of the things that I want to bring up, and we're not going to get into ethics too heavily, is that at least think about the ethics of the model you're building or the experiment you're conducting. How are you gathering that data? How are you manipulating that data? Right? That's definitely important to think about when conducting your experiment. But yeah, I'm not going to delve into ethics too heavily here or politics too heavily. But just going back to the 2016 campaign, you know, all of these people predicted a different outcome. But what's really important to understand, especially with data science, is it's not some magical crystal ball, right? It cannot 100% accurately predict the future. It's based on historical data, which you then gather in order to make better data-driven decisions. Okay?
What is the name of the documentary again? You mentioned?
It's called The Great Hack.
The Great Hack.
Yeah.
The great hack.
All right, so here is an example of what Obama's data science team did. So you see here we have 10 different landing pages, and these are to maximize signups and donations for the campaign. So what do you see here? We have Are You In? 2012 starts here. You have some landing pages with this image and some without. And the differences are so subtle. Do you think anyone would notice? And do you think that these subtle changes would ultimately impact the outcome of signups and donations? Definitely.
Subconsciously.
Subconsciously, right? We don't know. We don't know why we would sign up on one page versus another. Okay.
It was the most successful sign-up page.
Do I know? No, I don't know, but maybe if you check out this link, I think they should have a bit more details about how this campaign was run. All right, A/B testing on newsletters and email. This can be done, right? This can be tested. I'm a marketing manager, so I do this all the time. And I'm not sure if any of you have gotten my emails, but if you have, I want to thank you for being a part of my experiment. Right? Did you know? Nope, probably not. So how can I conduct A/B tests in emails? What do you think? We can conduct A/B tests on subject lines. So for example, I sent out an email for this meetup, and one of the emails, version A, said meetup and live stream, and the other email said community talk. Do you think that affected whether people showed up tonight? Maybe. So yeah, if you work for Nordstrom or Amazon or any e-commerce company, they would use words like free or promotion or discount, 20% off. What about from names? It matters, yeah. So maybe people are more likely to open an email from my boss, the CEO and lead instructor at our boot camps, versus Blair, although I would be happy to test that. My boss is very competitive, so I'm sure he would be happy about that. What else? Send dates, right? Maybe emails are more likely to be open to your target audience on a Thursday versus a Monday, or maybe even a weekend. And send time. So maybe your audience, maybe they're night owls, or maybe they're early risers and they check their email first thing. So all of these matter, and all of these can help you build a successful marketing campaign if you test them well. All right, so now we get to the fun part. And I would really encourage you to participate because it is a lot of fun. So what we're going to be trying to do is figure out intuitively if version A or if version B performed better. And we'll go on honor system tonight, but whoever gets the most accurate, the most intuitively accurate, wins a special prize. So we're going to be giving away a Data Science Dojo backpack valued at $85. So definitely would encourage you to participate. So right now, we are looking at 2 landing pages, okay? And we are testing a call to action, okay? So version A, which is our existing experience, is green, and version B is red, okay? Which button increased the number of clicks? So raise your hand if you think it's version A, green. Okay, and how many of you think version B, red? Okay, I would like to hear from some of you. Why do you think the green button? Why do you think version A?
Just the mindset that green means to go, red means don't go.
Red means don't go, okay.
Green is soothing color. It gives better look on screen.
Right, green is associated with health, prosperity, money, right? And those of you who voted for version B, can I ask why? Why do you think version B?
There's a sense of urgency, like a sense of imminence. Like, click here now.
Like, do it now.
Yeah,
Sign up now.
yeah.
Stands out on the page, the green face into the background with the other green elements in there.
Okay. All right, so that was about half and half, I would say. Maybe more voted for green. All right, let's see here. So it was actually the red button that increased clicks by 21%. And most of the time when I do this experiment, most people get it wrong. Even I got it wrong on the first try. So that just goes to show you can't always rely on intuition. Okay, so for this next one, we are looking at the menu. So version A says, why use us? And version B says, how it works. So which experience increased clicks by 47.7%? Yikes, that's a lot. So how many of you think version A? Okay, I see 3 of you. And the rest, everybody else, version B?
Yeah.
Okay, those of you who said version A, why so?
It's direct.
Who's direct?
More personal.
More personal? Okay, and those of you who said version B, why?
It's simpler, straightforward, and
It's more,
you've seen that button a million times before, probably.
Okay,
Yeah.
it has more of selling tone, which is not there in version B.
more of selling.
Yeah. Version B is more like it tells the viewer to understand how the system is working rather than kind of appealing them to why use them.
Mhm.
Right. So
Right.
I feel version B is more appealing in terms
People
of
more,
tracking.
people more likely to click on why use this after they understand how it works.
Right, so maybe they have reviews there. So you want to look at the product first before going to reviews. So let's see here. And you guys were right. So how it works. Increased clicks by 47.7%. Okay, can you see this? Jocelyn versus Michael. Okay, we are looking at conversion rate. So who has a higher conversion rate? Okay, so you know, how many people downloaded a form, or maybe they signed up for a newsletter? Who had the higher conversion rate here? Jocelyn or Michael? How many of you think Jocelyn? Nobody. Really? No one's brave enough? Okay. What about Michael? Okay, a few more people. I saw some people didn't vote. So don't be scared. Okay. Why? Why do you think Jocelyn?
I don't like Michael's picture just kind of looks cleaner. Like there's no shadow in the back.
Yeah.
No shadow. Okay.
Lighter picture. So I was thinking the blue one first, but then the picture is a little bit dark and shades the background.
Mhm.
So Michael looks more clear.
Michael's more clear. Okay. Sure.
The high contrast shirt that Jocelyn is wearing distracts from the message.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
The background color of Michael is much lighter, so the readability will be higher.
Michael's is less wordy.
Less wordy. Is it?
Yeah, they're different.
There's also
It is
clarity
different.
on the face.
Yes.
Whereas Jocelyn's, hair is kind of covering up his
Yeah.
full face.
Yeah, the second one looks more professional.
Yeah, more professional.
Yeah.
And I think the background, the contrast is a little bit higher than the others. So
Mhm.
it looks more like the white area, white space looks more.
Michael looks sunnier overall.
Sunnier.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys were right. So Michael increased conversions by 21%. Okay, so we are now looking at a company called Awayfind. So mobile notifications for priority messages. Okay, so are you guys able to read this okay? All right, so version A says, let us find your urgent messages. And version B says, get away from your inbox, let urgent emails cut through the clutter and find you instantly. And which version increased signups by 38%?
Version A.
Version A, show of hands. Okay. And then the rest, version B? Okay, so why do some of you think version A?
Fewer words to the point, no problem.
Short, concise.
Yeah, and it is harmonious. Right? There is no jump. There is a font change, so it's. I mean, there's
Oh,
a
but
change in
yeah,
font, change
there
in
is a font
size, so
change.
there's like a jump, right?
Right.
Yeah, that is more smooth.
And it's more catchy. It's like, let us find you. Basically, you're saying, let us do it.
Yeah.
You do it.
And version B?
I think version A is ambiguous. It's more vague. Version B hits the point what they are trying to do.
Oh, okay, so how are they going to do it?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of going off of that. Let us find your urgent emails wouldn't make me click try it free. Whereas this version B, just reading that is like, okay, I don't really need to see much else.
Okay, so you're saying that it looks like someone else would have access to your messages.
Yeah, sure, you can say that too.
No, what you were saying is the way I understood what you said was version B
I
tells
don't-
you you don't need to read further.
Yeah.
Whereas in version A you feel like you might maybe need to read further. Is
Yeah.
what you were saying? Okay.
And also in version B, so it's kind of like a title, the first sentence, and it gives you what they are trying to do, and there's kind of description just behind it, underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
It looks more clear to me because in the first one, I don't want to go to read the second one, and the title is better. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, let's see who won.
Ooh.
Version B. Right? So sometimes a longer but clearer message is more effective, gets the point across. Can you guys see this one? Might be a little too difficult to read, but okay. So we are looking at an online form for data center pricing. Okay. So this first form, version A, or actually I should ask, which radically redesigned form increased B2B leads by 368.5%?
Version A.
Version
Version A.
A. Yeah.
I haven't even read it. How do you know? Okay, so version A is asking for services, collocation, cloud computing, internet connectivity, managed server. Okay. And then version B, it's asking data center location, total required RAM, total required processor in gigahertz, remote backups. So which one increased B2B leads? Version A. Okay. Most of you. And what about version B? Couple? Okay.
It depends who it's aimed at too, because if you were to ask me, I'd probably go, I don't know how much speed I need. But if it's aimed at the right person, they'll tell you exactly what they need.
I feel if he's a serious buyer, a very potential lead, then the version B will be stronger. And someone who is just exploring, maybe version A will be.
Okay, so someone like me who's a marketing manager, version A might work best for me, but someone who is our actual IT guy, version B would be better for him.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I have no idea what my total required processor in gigahertz would be, but 200 sounds like a good number.
So it's a basically
Sure.
audience segmentation issue.
Okay.
Does it has anything to do with the PCI and other icons
Mm-hmm.
that also increases the reliability?
Yep, that could also have a factor. All
Also, when
right.
we say get a code, it's giving you the option that you're not liable to purchase anything. You're just getting a code
Right.
and some of the privacy statements.
There's less pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And more options to check rather than to at least get a code.
Yeah.
At the initial point, it will ask someone to write, type, comment. It gives a pain. Why should I give my information? And over here, the comment comes to last. Okay, fine. I'm finishing off, so let me give.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do less of the work. Okay, let's see who was right. Version A. Who's winning so far?
Everyone.
This isn't my first rodeo, so.
Okay, honor system. All right. I think this is the last one. So we are looking at California Closets. Okay, they are a closet organizational company. If you can't manage your own closet, so we're looking at two different pages here. Which version increased leads by 115%? Okay, version A says you've arrived. Get organized with the best. Call or click today. And version B says clean, bright, organized. Schedule your free design consultation today. Which version increased leads?
Version B.
B.
A lot of people said version B. Why?
Free.
Free?
And
It shows you what the future is like, what the future is going to be like if you click. Creates a picture in your head, if you will.
Okay.
And
Oh yeah,
also
my closet's gonna be clean after
Yeah, and
this.
also closet is more towards clean, organized, those catchy words.
Another version A asks you to take more actions like call and click today. So the reader might think, why should I do it? Why can't you give me action?
Right, there's more work on my part,
Yeah.
but I just want it for free. Anybody else?
What I do like about A is that it says you've arrived at the very best. Stop shopping. Maybe somebody can tell them about.
Right, so a little more emphasis behind the brand.
Ooh.
All right. So version A increased leads by 115%. This is why you should test. So just like this one, and I think overwhelmingly the first one we ran, it just goes to show that our intuition is often wrong and customers would behave much differently than you would think. All right, so jumping to multivariate testing. Okay, So we talked about A/B testing, right? We're testing two versions, version A and version B. You have your control and you have your treatment. But now, with multivariate testing, I am testing several different variants, several different versions, right? So I have a little bit more flexibility with this in the number of items I'm able to test. So for example here, you have, number one, you have an image, and then maybe you're testing a sign up. Then you have an image and a video, and a sign up and a video. And this is showing that number two is the winner, possibly because there's no distraction there, but we don't know what the criteria for success was. This is similar to the Obama campaign when we looked at those 10 different landing pages, right? You can test several different variations of an item at once. And then just comparing A/B testing versus multivariate testing. So why would we use one over the other? So the common use for A/B testing is you are comparing two very different designs with each other, version A and version B, a green call to action and a red call to action. And with multivariate testing, you have several minor variations which are up for debate, okay? So you can have two colors of a button and maybe 3 different headlines. And this is also called full factorial testing because you're testing different factors. Some advantages with A/B testing, right? So it is simple in design. You're only worried about one change, and a small sample size may be okay. With multivariate testing, again, you have a lot more flexibility because you're testing several different combinations at once. So some limitations with A/B testing is you are trying only one alternative. So maybe one week I send out a newsletter and I test the call to action. And maybe the next week I test the subject lines. And then the third week I'm testing the winning subject line and the winning call to action. So it might take a bit more time versus if you were to run a multivariate test and you had a large enough sample size, you might be able to find those results in one go. However, some cons with multivariate testing is that you are going to need a much larger sample size. So for example, let's say I have 200 users that I'm testing on. With an A/B test, I can run one experiment on 100 people and another experiment on the other 100 people. But with a multivariate test, if I'm testing 5 or 6 different variants, I'm going to need a much larger sample size to understand interactions and how these behave with each other. And what I mean by interactions is, let's say, for example, I work for a pharmaceutical company and I'm testing out the effectiveness of different drugs. So maybe I have hair loss medication or blood pressure medication, maybe cholesterol medication. Okay, so maybe some patients, they're taking one of those medications. Maybe some are taking a combination of those medications. I'm going to need to have a better understanding of how these experiences interact with each other. Okay, jumping into some terminology. We have our control and our treatment, right? So our control, that is the default experience. That is our version A, right? That is the way things are now. Or if you work in clinical trials or psychology, you would call that your placebo. And then the treatment, that is the change we want to make, okay? So for example, the current look and feel of our Buy Now button is green. And the change we want to make is from green to blue. And again, you can see that this has history and relevance in clinical trials. Let's jump into metrics. Sorry, before I jump ahead, is everybody clear with that? Okay. So let's look at metrics in A/B testing, right? This is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to take away. So as I said earlier, your ability to define metrics will determine your contribution to your company, right? Because you have to know what it is you're measuring for. What is it you're optimizing for? You can't just say, okay, I'm running an experiment and this had a high click-through rate, but it also had a low conversion rate. Or maybe it had a high bounce rate. Try to figure out what it is you're testing for, because otherwise the data can get a bit messy. So let's talk about this for a second. Let's say that I scraped the data, or I changed the layout, or maybe I'm building a predictive model. Is the most important thing for me how high the accuracy of my model is? Or is it more important the recommendations I get from my model? So let's talk about this for a second, and let's talk about Amazon, okay? They're an e-commerce company. So let's just discuss what would be some metrics that are important to Amazon.
Click-through rate, conversion rate.
Click-through rate, conversion rate,
Speed of landing page. How
Yep.
fast the
Page
loads,
speed.
Page speed, yeah.
And then I don't know what the term for is, bailing on the purchase page, going all the way and bailing on the purchase page.
bouncing, Yep.
Yeah.
Amount of purchases.
amount of purchases.
Items in cart.
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
What's the total revenue from the customers clicking?
Well, sorry, let me go back to that one for a second. So number of items in the cart. So let's say that I put into my cart a pair of Nike basketball shoes or really expensive Yeezys, okay? But then in the recommendations, I'm seeing recommendations for hair bands, hair ties, sweatbands, socks. So then those items are of significantly lesser value. So then is it really the number of items in my cart that matter?
I mean, it depends. Right. Some customers, maybe they would just add those items to their cart as well and purchase those, right? So, I don't know. Maybe it's a direct correlation between the click-through rate and the amount of purchases of the number of items in the cart.
It could be, yeah.
See, it could matter what all combination of products can go. If I have small ticket items of gifts, which I can bundle it up and selling, then it matters. If it's a big ticket item, only a very small item can go on with it. Because the pocket size of customer at a one purchase is a size actually which person has to think about. So the page has to be designed in that way that only this kind of product should be displayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you sell a product with add-ons, right? That could matter. Or maybe you sell a product that can't be used completely without those add-ons. And then, sorry, you had mentioned another metric.
Yeah, the total amount of the transaction.
Total amount of the
Right.
transaction.
Like,
Yeah.
how much did they actually purchase for in that particular session?
Number of alternatives searched to the big ticket item.
Oh, okay.
If
So
they
no-
spend a lot of, if they come in and say for Vizio and they start looking at Sharp and Toshiba and that sort of thing, then the propensity to purchase doesn't increase or fall.
right. That's absolutely true. Number of unique queries. What else? Anybody else?
Move to your buy versus wish list.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
How about the time they spend on the website?
Yep, session duration, definitely.
And a corollary to that would be number of pages.
Number of pages per visit.
Heat map will work. What are areas which are covered, which a customer viewer took more time
Mm-hmm.
in compare of another. areas. So the layout can be further redesigned or,
Right, with the heat map.
yeah.
Yeah, so we actually use a tool called Hotjar. It's great if you don't want to run a formal A/B testing campaign through Google Analytics or something that involves a lot of effort. It's really great. Just go ahead and set up the page that you want to start tracking, and you can see these different heat maps where people click, their movement, even if they don't click on the page. So that is actually a great tool for understanding the effectiveness of redesigning a website.
So in heat map, what all metrics comes under, like,
So for me, let's say I changed a call to action from sign up to register, or maybe learn more to register. And it takes them to the exact same page, but I would want to track, am I getting more clicks this time than the last time with the same sample size?
So it is like a density of clicks on your screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Again, metrics are so important, and you may not work for Amazon, but think about what's important to you and what project are you working on currently, right? So I talk a lot about marketing because that's what I work in, but if you're building a predictive model, think about maybe how are those changes affecting your recommendations. And maybe it's not just the UX or the UI. Maybe it's not just the front-facing design. Maybe there's something on the back end as well, right? Because Amazon, how many of you think Amazon is the prettiest website? Not really. But how many of you think it's effective? Yeah, absolutely. And that just goes to show that pretty doesn't necessarily translate to effective as well. All right, so looking at different metrics used for A/B testing. So for search engines, maybe we'd want to know the number of queries per unique user. If people are searching for Data Science Dojo, what else might they be searching? Session length, somebody mentioned that. So how long do they stay on your website? Sessions per unique user. So do they come back? How many sessions are there in a day? Page views, right? Page views per session. Page views for the day, long term. And bounce rate. Is my page effective in getting subscriptions or signups? Or do people land on the page and then leave? And then online retailers, like we just talked about, conversion rate, revenue per unique user, average cart value, and other websites, click-through rate, newsletter sign-up. And again, each business is different, so try and think about what's important to you and your team. And especially if you are working on a project with you and your team, your boss might come to you and say, hey, I want to see this metric improved. But if you are working on a project, you may know best. So it's definitely something that you have to stand up for because you are working on that project, right? And you're seeing how those users are interacting with those changes. Okay, so jumping into a little bit of statistics, right? Just basic enough that it's of use to you. Not gonna completely go over your head, I hope. So we are gonna talk about null versus alternate hypothesis. So how many of you are familiar with this? Okay, great. So null hypothesis, or H-naught. So this is when you assume that your control and treatment are similar in terms of the parameter you're testing, okay? So, and I'm gonna break it down to you in layman's terms in a bit. and you have your alternate hypothesis. And this is stating that the treatment is different from the control. I'm not necessarily saying that it's more or it's greater than the control. It could be less as well. It's just saying that the treatment is different. So null versus alternate hypothesis. So the null hypothesis here, we're looking at our control, which is the green button, and the treatment, which is the blue button. So the null hypothesis states that the green button and the blue button have the same click-through rate, okay? They're exactly the same. And the alternate hypothesis states that each of these buttons has a different click-through rate. And then looking at type 1 and 2 errors. So right here we have a confusion matrix. So this is showing us a type 1 error, which is when you incorrectly reject the null hypothesis, okay? So let's say, for example, you have your blue button and your green button, okay? You are rejecting the null hypothesis. So you are detecting a difference when there is no difference, okay? And just the opposite, a type 2 error is when you are incorrectly accepting the null hypothesis, okay? So you are saying that you do not see a difference in click-through rate, but you failed to detect so, okay? So why would something like this happen?
Anomalous data.
Sorry?
Anomalous data.
Anomalous data.
Small sample.
Small sample. You didn't have a large enough sample size. The data could have been sampled or randomized incorrectly. Maybe you sampled folks from Washington and another set in California. And what about if it just is, right? And we're going to talk about confidence intervals in a second, but if I have a confidence interval of 95%, I'm 95% confident that this is going to be my result, that maybe the value or rating of an average rating of a product would fall between these two values. There's still that 5% chance that something could go wrong, right? It's not a 100% indicator. And we talk about this at the boot camp, which is if you have a model that's 100% accurate, is that really the best model? Right? Sometimes things just are. Okay, so just breaking it down for you in story time or layman's terms. You have the cook and the smoke detector, okay? So the null hypothesis states that the cook says there is no smoke. And the alternate hypothesis says that the smoke detector says there is smoke, okay? So what could go wrong here? With a type 1 error, the reality is that there is no smoke, but the smoke alarm goes off. Can you see a problem there? Right? So the cook removes the smoke alarm because it's loud and he wants to prevent type 1 errors. But that results in a type 2 error where there actually is smoke, but the alarm does not go off. Okay? And then we have the boy who cried wolf, right? So the null hypothesis states that there is no wolf, and the alternate hypothesis says that there is a wolf, right? So we know how this story goes, right? So type 1 error says the villagers believe the lying boy, even though there is no wolf. And the type 2 error is that the villagers stop believing the boy when there is a wolf, okay? Are we good on this? Any questions? Okay. All right, confidence interval. Does anybody use this on a daily basis, or is this just something we learned in school? There's software that does this for us now. We don't have to do it by hand, right? Okay. So why would we use a confidence interval? Right? So when we calculate the mean, we have just one estimate. But when we have a confidence interval, it gives us a bit richer data and shows us the likely values of the true population mean. Okay? So this is great if you are sampling. So let's say we have a business problem, okay? On a 5-point scale, a product has an average rating of 4.32 and a standard deviation of 0.845 based on 62 ratings. What is the 95% confidence interval? So let's say we're shopping on Amazon. Just to sidetrack for a second, let's say we're shopping on Amazon. What is your method of shopping for products there? Do you guys pay attention to reviews? You do? What do you look for in a review? Star rating. So are you looking for all 5 stars or 4 stars?
4-star and 4 and above. Yeah. Definitely not all 5 stars.
Why not all 5?
I've seen a lot of fake reviews for 5 stars.
Fake reviews.
Fake reviews are only like 2 reviews. It's like it's either they're all fake or there's just not enough.
Yeah. So a product having all 5-star reviews, I'll be really suspicious of that.
You would be suspicious.
Yeah.
Would anybody else be suspicious? You should be, because Amazon, not sure if you know this, but 30 to 40% of their reviews are fake. Right?
The
Who
way
we-
to get around that is to sort by most recent review. Yelp does the same thing.
Yep, I was just going to
Glassdoor,
say,
everybody does the same thing. We always sort by popular as opposed to recent.
as opposed to recent. And Yelp even pays to have negative reviews taken down. All right, because really, why on earth would somebody leave a But really, why would somebody leave a one-page review for a banana slicer? So, not to get too sidetracked, but so let's look at this business problem. Okay, we're calculating the 95% confidence interval here. So how? So then to solve, you would take the mean, 4.32, plus or minus your margin of error to get your confidence interval. So now I can definitely say that I am 95% confident that the average review for all customers is between 4.1 and 4.54. Okay? And again, there's software now that does this for you. You can easily calculate the appropriate sample size to use. And you can obviously look up your z-score and your critical value. So what we just looked at was for sample size, but you can also do this if you know your population mean, which is denoted by mu. And then just kind of showing you how we got these numbers. You can ignore the bottom curve and look at the normal distribution, okay? So you can see here, generally at 95% confidence, you would have a z-score of 1.96. But there you can find for a sample size of 62 folks, we have our t-score, which is 2. And then you can also conduct a t-test, which I won't go over just due to time. But this presentation will be recorded later if you want to go back and take a look and actually try this out on your own. Okay, so we've talked about A/B testing, and we've talked about multivariate testing. But here we have an AA test. So what is an AA test, and why would I conduct that? So an A/B test is when your control and your treatment are the same, okay? My call to action, version A, is green, and my treatment is also green. Why would I run this experiment? For validation of setup, okay? So let's say you run your experiment exactly the way you would for an A/B test, but everything stays the same. And let's say at the end of the AA test, your results were significantly statistically different, okay? Let's say that version B, which is the same green call to action, had a 10% higher click-through rate, right? You just want to make sure that the experiment you're setting up is actually set up correctly, right? Again, you want to make sure that you're sampling correctly, or maybe something on the back end is broken, so you can go back and fix it. Okay, so we've talked about AA testing, we've talked about A/B testing, and multivariate testing. So let's talk about a campaign. Maybe you are running an entire experiment. So what are the steps to run that experiment? So you want to start with the planning stage. And it's important that you consider this each time, because you want to understand the factors, the things you are changing. You want to understand your sample size. So how many people do I want to run my experiment on? What business question to answer? You know, why conduct an A/B test if you're not going to solve a problem? So that is the most important part of this, is understanding what business problem am I trying to solve and what metrics am I trying to optimize for. You would then move on to coding and logging, so where you set up your test in instrumentation, and then you would run your AA test. Make sure everything is set up correctly. From there, you can then run your A/B or multivariate test. And then, all right, so I have completed my experiment. So what do I do now? I then go to analysis and interpretation. So some things to consider with this. It's definitely an art. You may find that the data isn't so clear at first. And some things can obviously affect your metrics. So seasonality, for example. If I'm running an ad during Christmas time, I'm likely to get a higher click-through rate, especially if I work for an e-commerce company. And newness effect. I could be sending newsletters for maybe 6 months with the same layout, same color design, but maybe the next newsletter that I change has a completely different design, and it throws people off. So maybe they're a bit more intrigued and they would click this time. And then make a decision. Do I ship it or not? And if you're not so sure, then maybe you want to start over, right? Think about what might have gotten a bit messy. What data was not clear, okay? Did I use a large enough sample size? Did I run the experiment long enough to get statistically significant results? And then categories of metrics. So, all right, I've run my experiment. I might run different experiments to get different metrics for short-term and long-term, okay? So examples of short-term metrics are click-through rate, right? It's as simple as changing a call to action on your website or an email. And again, setting up a heat map will show you this almost immediately. Bounce rate. You know, if I want people to click through and I update that call to action, then maybe they won't leave so soon. And then long term. So days with at least one visit. Do I have user loyalty? For our boot camps, we have a learning portal, and we want to make sure that our students are coming back to go through some of the material, especially those that have graduated. Are they coming back and looking at some of the additional resources that we offer? So we might be looking at cohort analysis and loyalty. And then here are some A/B testing tools. I haven't included all of them, and I don't quite use all of them, but we use Google Analytics quite heavily. Hotjar, which isn't mentioned here, that's great for creating heat maps, recordings of user activity on your website, setting up funnels. Optimizely is another very popular one, great for, specifically great for A/B testing and setting up experiments. All right, any questions?
How do we lie with statistics?
How do you, sorry?
How do we lie with statistics?
How do you statistics?
So very high level question, and basically two things. How do you get sample size, and how do you estimate the number of samples?
Okay, so to estimate the number of your sample size, this involves a little bit more mathematics and statistical analysis. But I'm happy to share a formula with you. Again, there's software that does this. So like we use HubSpot, which is a CRM. And I think if you use maybe Salesforce or Marketo, they would do this for you. So you say, this is who I want to send my email to or run my ad on. Who do I want to target? And so if you decide, okay, I want to test this on X% of users, it will share that with you. But I'm happy to include that post presentation in the meetup group as well as in the recording.
Yeah, that'd be great.
For multivariate testing, how do we do it? Because there will be multiple aspects which we are checking on each layout. So how will I come to know that this user or the person is into this reason? Or this is more effective algorithm?
So again, it depends on what you're optimizing for. If you're optimizing for signups or video plays or click-through, you can set up, so like we've gone through website redesigns. So we might set up experiments in Google Analytics and we can track each page separately. So that's definitely one way to track. And I've conducted A/B tests through emails too. So maybe I'm testing different subject lines with the different times that I'm sending the email, or click-through, or call to actions. So within the email, it might just be 2 different emails. and the call to action is changing each time. I might have 3 that just changes randomly.
But still in multi-layered it has many elements. So how will a person control that? These are the trigger points.
So you're asking, once you run the multivariate test, how do I determine which one is the most effective?
What elements made it important? Because
Okay.
a couple of layouts, not only the one of the element must be different. Of course, the copy might be different, the color might be different, the font size might be different. So this or this, what work is the font work, the color work, so that next time when we are creating the layout, we will try to keep those type of color tones.
So you can look at a couple different things. So if you are changing the subject line just as one part of that multivariate test, maybe you would want to look at the number of opens. If you're looking at click-through rate, you might look at if you're looking at call to actions and you're changing that, you might want to look at higher click-through rate. And you can look at those separately as well as combined, which email was the most effective in, whichever metric you're optimizing for. Does that make sense? Kind of?
When we do the sample sizing, the just guidance, like either I make 50-50
Mhm.
or I take 50% and out of 50 I make 25-25 and then I run it the campaign full. So how should we decide whether this approach or that approach or
How large or how small to run?
yeah.
So when you calculate sample size, you generally get the minimum number of people you need to run your experiment on in order for it to be statistically significant. The larger sample size you have, the greater chance you have of identifying statistically significant results. Any other questions? Do we have some time for some lame statistics jokes? Yeah? Okay, let's see here. There's a lot of information that I'm not going to get to today because we are almost out of time. Okay. All right. Have you heard the latest statistics joke? Probably. How many statisticians does it take to change a light bulb? 1 to 3. Alpha is 0.05 with the 0.95 confidence. What do you call a tea party with 30 statisticians?
Normal.
Significant.
A Z party.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the statistician who was thrown in jail? No? He now has 0 degrees of freedom. Well, I'm glad some of you are laughing. So 3 statisticians go out hunting together. After a while, they spot a solitary rabbit. The first statistician takes aim and overshoots. The second aims and undershoots. The third shouts, "We got him." Okay, last joke. A statistician's wife has twins. He was delighted, and he called to tell the minister the good news. "Excellent," said the minister. "Bring them to church on Sunday. We'll baptize them." "No," replied the statistician. "Let's just baptize one. We'll leave the other as control." All right, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed my stand-up routine. And by the way, who won the A/B testing experiment?
Utah.
Who got the most right? Was it you? Was it you?
No, no.
Wasn't it you?
I was 50%.
50. Okay. Nathan, did you see?
No, I was participating.
Yeah.
We'll have to watch the video.
Yeah, we'll have to watch the video to tell. But I have the backpack here. So, who wants a backpack?